This is Compound, a pixel art retro first-person shooter in all the best possible ways. This procedurally generated roguelite might at first come off like a simple throwback to the days of Wolfenstein, but Wolfenstein in VR, this is not. Stick around for our comprehensive review, and I'll explain why. Hey guys, this is Chris from the VR Grid, and I am a huge fan of retro first-person shooters, and from time to time have been known to lose days of my life playing roguelites. So yeah, Compound was a game for me, and one I actually played previously on PC VR. So with the incoming release of the Quest version, I thought it a perfect opportunity to jump back in and put out a full review for all of you. But before I do, please consider hitting that like button if you would be so kind, as it really helps us wage war against the almighty YouTube algorithm. And of course, if you like what we do here and want to see more quality VR content, then go somewhere else. Ha, no kidding, subscribe. Subscribing is what you do. There is no one else. Anyway, on to the review. Compound tells the very deep and heart-wrenching story of a man and his gun. Okay, it's not deep in the least. In fact, it's barely a story at all. And honestly, that's how I like my retro shooters. Just tell me where to go and who to shoot. Here in Compound, the premise is very much The Raid Redemption, an awesome Indonesian action movie that saw the protagonist being tasked with starting at the main floor of a high-rise and working his way up to the top. Yeah, that's you in Compound. And as a side note, if you haven't seen The Raid and you like action movies, make that your next movie. Anyway, like I said, the premise here is simple, and getting into the game is very simple as well. Heading off to the shooting range first off is a good idea, as it will help you to get comfortable with the reload controls, as I found they took a few minutes to get used to the semi-manual, semi-arcade reload mechanics of each gun. A few minutes of this, difficulty level chosen, and I was off. The key gameplay mechanic here in Compound is clearing a level of enemies, then evacing back to the elevator to clear the next level, then the next, and so on and so forth. Like I said, basic. And at first, I almost wrote the game off as yet another basic and easy retro knockoff VR shooter with dumb AI and some color to mix things up. And I was wrong. You see, Compound starts out slow and simple, and for its own good, maybe a bit too slow. Starting off, the only weapon you have are the blue starter pistols found in the glass emergency boxes found before most of the entrance doors early on. Pay attention though, because there are actually 3 different styles of these pistols, each with a very different firing style. Regardless, ammo is infinite on these and reloading automatic. As such, I quickly started dual wielding these. Ammo and health is picked up off of fallen enemies, and looking at either wrist shows you a layout of the level, what rooms you have yet to explore, and where, if any, new weapons might be located, marked by a white circle. In addition, it is also here that you can track your ammo levels. Now these early levels, especially on the easy difficulty, really are doomed for dummies, and I pretty much walked through these levels. However, pretty quickly the game starts to throw more and more different enemies at you, all with various capabilities and behaviors. And as soon as the game started doing this, Compound began to get its claws in me, as I started trying out different weapon combinations to counter these various altercations. However, I quickly tired of the game's reload mechanic, as I really found dual wielding was where the game found its flow. Thankfully, this brought me to the mutations vending machine found in the game's staging area, and lo and behold, I found a mutation that allowed for auto reloads, though at a slower rate than manual reload. That sounded like a deal to me, and off I went, never looking back. With my newfound mutation and a few lucky gun pickups early on, I tore through the 20 or so levels in the campaign, and then got destroyed on the final rooftop level. Yes, I still found the game to be a bit basic and the AI a bit standard retro shooter dumb. But now I was hooked. Then the game surprised me. Heading back in for another go around, I quickly noticed that even on the same difficulty setting, which was still easy because I'm a big baby, this was not the same game I had just played. It was harder, and different enemy varieties started showing up quicker, and new weapons that I unlocked during my first playthrough started showing up. Future playthroughs unlocked new mutations, more weapons, and yes, the game was still skewing harder even on easy mode. Well, now I needed to know what harder difficulties played like, so like an idiot, I went right to the hardest level, and within the first 2 levels ended up being hunted through the level by a crazed rat and annihilated. This happened a few more times, and I quickly realized I wasn't ready and simply needed more mutations and better guns in order to even think about poking my head back in there. And yeah, it turns out you can even unlock a 4th difficulty level, so yeah, the game has some legs for those persistent enough to play through it. Now, besides having a solid roguelite game loop, what I think helps to raise Compound above its fairly basic game design is that it's just so damn polished. Created by just one guy, Compound spent years in early access over on PC, and it does feel like a game that has been tuned and tweaked to absolute perfection. Admittedly, I'm not the biggest fan of the reload system, and the lack of an in-game seated play option is a glaring omission, but the movement, hit zones, and the gunplay itself is very fluid and just a joy to play. And thankfully, it holds up well even as the game scales up its speed and overall difficulty, at times almost turning into a bullet hell shooter, and pulling it off seamlessly. Visually, well, you can see it's very much a retro visual style, coming off even more vintage than, say, Doom, and almost more Wolfenstein with its clean, solid colors and flat level design. However, under closer inspection, it's not nearly as pixel art as one may first assume, with the game world actually using larger, flatter textures, with pixels being used more as shaders. Regardless, this may not be for everyone, but it works for Compound and comes off incredibly clean in the headset, looking to my eyes like a straight one-to-one port of the PC version, destructible environments and all. Now, the nitpicker in me would have liked to have seen some modern lighting techniques used here, a thing often being utilized in many modern pixel art shooters these days, and a technique that can really add some life to these retro-styled game worlds. In addition, I would have liked to have seen more verticality used, as the level design here, for the most part, is very simple and admittedly a bit boring and samey, really only stretching its legs on the final boss level, but at the same time proving the game engine can obviously do that. Sound-wise, the game also keeps things pretty simple, with gun sounds that aren't quite retro zips and zaps, but they aren't exactly very powerful sounding either. However, they get the job done and they didn't make my ears bleed. One thing I did really like though was some nice utilization of audio cues that alerts players to what an incoming area may contain enemy-wise, with the sounds of security turrets and driving robot tanks being heard off in the distance and allowing a bit of mental prep before you charge in. And finally, I love the music here, and not surprisingly so to anyone who follows the channel, as the game complements its retro vibe wonderfully with a collection of nice synthwave tunes to help keep the action moving forward. And that brings me to my final thoughts and review score. Compound is a simple but very effective roguelike shooter that drenches itself in all sorts of retro stylings. Fortunately, it nails the most important retro shooter aspect, and that's fun, simple shooting with little bullshit getting in the way. The VR Grid gives Compound an 8 out of 10. With 4 difficulty levels, over 10 weapons, and a large variety of enemy types, and a slew of modifiers, Compound offers roguelite fans a lot to chew on, even if the level design does wear a bit thin. However, the key takeaway here is roguelite fans, as the fun factor here is very much tied up in the game loop here. So if you're going in wanting a deeper retro shooter campaign with a rich narrative, this isn't for you. However, fans of roguelike shooters and that repetitive rise to greatness, this is a definite buy. Anyways, guys, that's it for us. Let us know in the comments below what you think of Compound. And don't forget, each and every Thursday, Virtual Boys, the VR podcast, is live here on YouTube, 6 p.m. Pacific and 9 p.m. Eastern, and then posted later that evening across all the major podcast networks. Thanks for stopping by, and as always, we will catch you on our next video.